because we're going to our Oxmoor Ford Lincoln Buzz line right now. Who's got our man from Cincinnati, 15:30 a.m. Reds Rap, Bengals Rap. You want to talk here about Cincinnati? Listen to this guy, Mo Egger. How are you doing today, Mo? Nothing much. It's another beautiful day here down in Louisville, little Bats country down here, and what we like to call Cincinnati Reds Town.
And you should. Some people in Ohio don't necessarily like that, but it's obviously Reds country, and the Bats have a great organization, awesome place to go watch baseball. Can't top it.
Yeah, for sure. We all three of us, we got our man Brad Steen. He's actually from Northern Kentucky area. He's our Reds rap guy. And, of course, myself, Tyler, and Kelly. We're all diehard Reds fans. We love it. We're excited about the season and what's going on. Obviously, there's been some setbacks, and it's not really mattered. The first thing I wanted to get into was this Joey Votto issue. He may have re-injured the knee just slightly, had another small procedure. He should be out 7 to 10 days. Is that a thing we should look at, too, as a problem for the Reds, this reoccurring injury, or you think he'll be okay?
Well, I think if anything, it's offset by the fact that this team has a little cushion right now, up 4.5 on the Pirates. The soft landing of pretty easy schedule the next couple of weeks. I mean, really don't play a winning team aside from the Pirates, Cardinals, and 3 with the Dodgers the rest of the way. I think, though, as you look across the next 3 or 4 weeks, I think they have to ask themselves, can we get by with guys like Miguel Cairo and Wilson Valdez getting long innings, logging major innings at the corner positions? They've had to stick one of those 2 guys at third base often this week because Scott Roll's back continues to be a problem. I mean, that might be their most recurring injury. And obviously because Joey Votto has continued to be out, they've had to put one of those 2 guys at first base at times when they haven't played Roland and Todd Frazier at the exact same time. I think they feel like the Votto thing, that once he comes back, it's not going to be a major issue. He's still going to be back by probably September the 1st. There's a really good chance before then. They're not in a situation, look, when Joey first went out, everybody was sort of saying the same thing, which was, all right, if they can just sort of stay within striking distance until Joey comes back, if they can stay afloat, tread water, whatever term you want to use, well, they've gained ground. Chances are when Joey comes back, they're at least going to be in striking distance and probably still going to be in first place.
Yes.
And so I think everybody's fear was at this stage they'd be maybe 4 or 5 games out, be spiraling out of control, and there would be a sense of urgency to get them back. And because of the fact that they've played well enough against admittedly some bad teams, that's not necessarily a major issue. I do think it's kind of interesting because for 6 weeks now, the Reds have been insisting that Joey Votto's knee is either not a problem or not serious, and the guy just had his second surgery in less than a month. So I find that kind of curious. But I think long-term, they feel pretty good about where they are.
That's a good point. Moving on now, what are what are some of your thoughts about Ryan Ludwig? I mean, this guy was left for dead in San Diego and Pittsburgh. The Reds took a chance on him because Jocketty had some experience with him. Has he been sort of some of the biggest surprise for the Reds this year, or what are your thoughts about him?
Given the fact that in the first 6 weeks of the season everybody wanted to park him on the bench in favor of Chris Heisey, yeah, I mean, you think over the last 4 or 5 weeks, with Jay Bruce not hitting, with Stubbs continuing to be really inconsistent, with Roland being up and down, with Phillips being hurt, and obviously without Joey Votto, I don't know where this team is without Ryan Ludwig. Obviously came through with the big hit yesterday, hit the homer on Friday. He's the kind of guy that if you gave him 550 at bats in a season, it would probably catch up to him. I think they actually use him pretty judiciously, where he's going to start 4, maybe 5 times a week if there's no off day. But he's not going to be a guy who's in there no matter what, day in and day out. And for a guy who's got a little bit of an injury history at 34 years old, I think that everybody recognizes that that's the right approach. But he's very good defensively. He's got an ability, especially playing in Great American Ballpark. He might hit 26, 27 homers this year. And if you look at the fact that the other outfield positions aren't producing right now, I don't know where this offense is without him, and I don't know where this offense is, for that matter, without Todd Frazier.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I remember when Walt Jocketty brought in Ryan Ludwig in the offseason, I talked to him, I turned around my buddy, and I told him, hey, this is a good pickup. I know he struggled, like you said, in the first few months of the season and whatnot, and people wanted him to be benched. But I liked him when he was a Cardinal. Like Brad said, when he was a Padre, I didn't keep up much. But when he was a Cardinal, I really did enjoy him. So I was glad we did get him. And like you said, Todd Frazier, he's just being a great replacement for the old veteran Scott Rowland himself being injured so much. And that's another thing I want to. When all these guys get healthy, what do we do with Frazier, Heisey, Stubbs, Ludwig? I mean, what do we do with all these guys? Because we'll have Votto at first. I mean, we have the veteran Rowland. Do we want to go with the experience, or do we want to go with the young talent?
Well, I think when Votto comes back, you're looking at the rest of the season. I would imagine that Frazier gets the bulk of the playing time at third base, but not all the playing time at third base. Certainly the fact that they've not had to run Scott Rowland in the ground could bode well for him being ready to contribute in September. The problem is his back continues to bother him.
Mm-hmm.
You really can't play him more than 3 consecutive games without that happening. And so, I think you're going to see, maybe 2/3 of the starts at third base go to Todd Frazier. I think in the final month of the season or so, when everybody's healthy, I think you'll see Ryan Ludwig play the majority of the playing time. I think it's going to be interesting to see what they do. This team 2 weeks ago admitted publicly that they were looking for a leadoff hitter, whether it would have been Shane Victorino or Jannard Span, Juan Pierre, any number of deals that didn't happen for a variety of reasons. Well, so they're still stuck with Stubbs and Cozart at the top of the order. I think it's going to be interesting to see when Votto comes back, if they finally move Phillips out of the 4 spot, put him in either the 1 or the 2, have Ludwig hit fourth, which I think you can get away with, and get more production from the top of the order. Because if you look at them offensively, that's their biggest problem. 2 guys in Stubbs and Cozart. Starts having a nice rookie season, but he doesn't get on base 30% of the time. Drew Stubbs doesn't get on base 30% of the time. And for a team that outwardly said we're looking for a leadoff hitter, well, if you didn't get a leadoff hitter, then when everybody's healthy, you should probably find somebody else to hit first or second. Brandon Phillips should be that guy. He has been that guy. And with Ryan Ludwig hitting, you've got a good right-handed bat that you could put in the 4-hole between Votto and Bruce. I think if anything else, that to me is what is going to be most interesting to see when Joey finally comes back.
Mo, we have a couple weeks now from the time that we kind of passed up on. Like you said, we were looking for a leadoff hitter. We publicly said we were trying to address that issue, and we got Broxton instead. A lot of excitement for that, really strengthening something that was already the strength of the team. But a couple weeks into it, what are your feelings on the trade deadline that we acquired Broxton?
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
What are your feelings on how, at the trade deadline, what we did was we acquired Broxton?
Yeah, I think with the Broxton deal, what that was, if anything, it was an acknowledgement that these starting pitchers are probably going to show some regression down the stretch. Homer Bailey has already gone past his career high in innings pitched. Mike Leake is probably going to go 20, maybe 25 innings over his career high in innings pitched. Cueto's going to go over 200 innings for the first time. Matt Latos might go over 200 innings for the first time. And so I think, if anything, what you need is more options to go to earlier in games. And look, Logan Ondrusek is probably going to pitch in more games this year than he ever has. Arredondo is a guy that a year and a half ago had Tommy John surgery. He's probably going to eclipse the 65-game mark. Obviously, Aroldis Chapman is as well. I think the Jonathan Broxton move was an insurance policy and sort of an acknowledgement that we're not going to be able to count on some of these starters to go 7 or 8, that we might have to shorten their innings, and we need another option to go to earlier in the game. Now, early reviews on Jonathan Broxton were great. He came in his first couple of outings, and he was lights out. His next 2, not very good. But I think across the final third of the season, this team's strength clearly is still going to be its bullpen. And if you're Dusty Baker and you're Brian Price, you've got a great luxury in that, in the 7th inning of a close ball game, you could run Marshall out there, you could run Ondrusek out there, you could run Arredondo out there, and now Jonathan Broxton, all while the most dominant pitcher in the game looms in the 9th inning. It gives a manager quite an advantage, and I'm not necessarily worried about what they didn't get offensively, just simply because the asking price was going to be a little bit too high. The Broxton move made sense to me. I think this team's starting pitching is going to have to be a little bit better than it has recently, but at least they've insured themselves against that happening in the final 50 or so games of the season.
Transitioning a little bit into the Bengals, I know you cover the Bengals up there since I live up there. For those of you who want to follow him on Twitter, it's at MoEgger1530. You can also check out his blog on ESPN1530.com. A Bengals question here: what is the season outlook, and what are some of your thoughts on the first scrimmage that you saw?
Well, my season outlook is honestly, I don't know. because as much as I will allow for the fact that a 9-7 team is supposed to get better, and I love the young nucleus, and I love the fact that this team, for the first time in forever, has been able to spend the off season just solely getting ready for a year and getting ready for the season. Nobody was outwardly demanding a trade. We didn't have to worry about somebody being a distraction. There was no lengthy holdout by anybody. Not a lot of that stuff that we've had to deal with and talk about so often. As a matter of fact, this has been the most boring first 2 weeks of training camp that I can recall, simply because there hasn't been anything other than football to talk about. But their schedule is going to get a lot tougher this year, and they're going to face a bunch of really good quarterbacks. And I come back to something I heard Bill Walsh once say, that he said if you have a second-year quarterback and he plays just as well in year 2 as he does in year 1, you count that as a win. It is sometimes really hard for quarterbacks, and they're going to expand the offense this year. They're going to test out Andy Dalton's arm strength. It's really difficult for good quarterbacks to make that leap in year 2. There just historically has seemed to be a little bit of a roadblock, even for guys who ended up being very, very good. I think they have gotten a little bit better in the backfield. I think they have a lot of guys to sort through to be the number 2 wide receiver, but not many guys with a pedigree. And I still think, aside from Geno Atkins, that the defense lacks a guy who totally keeps the other team's offensive coordinator up all week. Now, they've got a lot of bodies in the secondary, a good mix of youth and veterans. Unfortunately, most of those guys have gotten hurt the first couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot they've got to make up for there. I thought the first game of the season, the first preseason game, more than anything, what stood out with the injuries. I mean, they retooled the interior of that offensive line. Travell Wharton, one of the 2 guards they picked up. Obviously, Kevin Zeitler in the second round. Travell Wharton got hurt in like the 4th play the other night. Throw in the Malaluga injury, the Dunlap injury. I think more than anything else, they were able to move the ball pretty well. They got the special teams touchdown. Cedric Pierman, who's a backup running back, was very, very impressive. Armand Benz and Brandon Tate, I thought, sort of played to a draw in the competition for that second wideout spot. But the biggest problem after week 1 is your free agent acquisition, and Travell Wharton's probably done for the season. How do you replace him?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, you hit right on, since you brought up the running backs. That was my next question. To Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis, obviously he's there for Cedric Benson. I'm a Browns fan. I like Cedric Benson, though, because he was on my fantasy squad and he took me to the title. I had got to go with him. But do you that is a good pickup in your mind, an upgrade?
I don't know if it's a huge upgrade. He's younger and he's more reliable. Cedric had a lot of fumbling issues late last season. Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis has never fumbled in the pros. I don't know that they're necessarily that much better, but I do think it's going to be a little bit easier for them to use all the running backs. I mean, Cedric Benson really believed that the ball should go to him 50 times a game.
Right.
And I think by the end of the season, Jay Gruden, the offensive coordinator, was worn out by Cedric Benson. Not necessarily a bad guy, but a guy that thinks he should get the football every play. And so I think it's going to be a little bit easier for them to use Bernard Scott, Danny Herron if he makes the team, Brian Leonard if he makes the team. I think it's going to be a little bit easier for them to use the other running backs, sort of go a little bit more by committee, because Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis, say what you want about him, he's a team guy. I mean, you talk to him and you get the instant impression that this guy has been, fully indoctrinated in the Patriot way. Statistics don't matter all that much. Touches don't matter all that much. All that matters is how do you help the team win. And while Cedric Benson was very good here, and I thought should have gotten MVP votes back in 2009, Cedric was probably a little bit too much about Ced for this team's liking, and Ben Jarvis isn't that way. And so I think, if anything, they're just going to be better because they're going to be able to utilize everybody and not have to worry about their featured back throwing a temper tantrum.
Mo, we really appreciate having you on. Before we let you go, I know that it's a tough question, but what's your prediction for the Bengals' record this season?
I've stuck at 9-7, which is what their record was last year. I think ultimately they might be a better football team. I just don't know that it'll be reflected in the record because their schedule's going to take a major step forward in difficulty. And I still think, look, we could talk about the window closing between the Bengals and the Steelers and the Bengals and the Ravens. And the word you're hearing around the Bengals right now is stability. Unfortunately for them, they are competing with the two of the teams that you most associate with stability. And so I think it's going to be a good year for the Bengals. I think they're going to challenge for a playoff spot. I think they've got the ingredients to have a second-straight winning record for the first time in more than 25 years, or more than 22 years. But I just ultimately don't think they're going to be able to overcome some of the quarterbacks they faced this year. And so I see them at 9-7 and not a ton better.
Thanks a lot for coming on, Mo. We'll have to have you on again. We really appreciate it. Yeah, have a good rest of the weekend.
Anytime. No problem, guys. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. We'll be right back with more from 1450 The Sports Buzz and the Weekend Sports Buzz after these messages.